Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today we're going to talk about intellectual property rights of Korea, and pay a special attention and focus on this special concept called geographical indication. I would first like to start off by paraphrasing a very famous public figure whose name is Peter Drucker. He once said something like this: "The rapid development of technologies and economy have accelerated the world to become a knowledge-based economy. A knowledge-based economy or society has a lot to do with intellectual property. I will hereinafter call it the IP." Interestingly though, the IP is not as a whole a new phenomenon. Although we didn't use the exact word IP, intellectual value were deemed important, even back in the old days, modern days, and of course, today. Therefore, every nation had a tendency to strongly protect their intellectual values. Thus, the IP were set based on one principle, which is to protect their intellectual property. However, we live in a very different world now, as you can see in the slides over there. As the world becomes smaller due to globalization, increase the amount of information exchange, and later cause several problems. Especially this is more true where we witness the strong development of technologies. Handling of these international IPs will become very essential, complicated, and sophisticated. In order to solve these issues, there have been numerous international meetings to set a new economic order. After long discussion, and finally making IP one of the three major elements of the TRIPS agreement of the WTO, they are, of course, products, service, and intellectual property. According to one research institution, 90% of economic growth in the United States from 2001 to 2003 comes from intellectual property. Let's look at another example. Another example would be the case of Philip Morris. Philip Morris had bought the company Kraft recently. In its acquisition of Kraft, 90% of entire asset of the acquired Kraft was intangible assets, as you see in the slide, such as brand values, technologies, and business rights, and intellectual property rights. As we can see, only 10% make up the tangible assets, like real property. As we can see, we now live in a world where IP became a big factor in the economy. Lastly, we're going to look at another example. According to the Brookings Institute, the average ratio for intangible assets to tangible assets in a firm was 38% to 62% in 1982. But later, it changed it into the other way around, of 62% versus 38%, only a decade later. What do these examples imply us? They give us two meanings. Seeing it from a narrow view, we can say that IP rights provides us wealth. We can measure our wealth even when we can't see them. Whereas we can look at from another point of view, with a broader point of view. As an IP becomes a crucial factor of showing national competence, quite a number of conflict arises out of cases regarding IP rights. For example, a lot of you know about this case. Samsung and Apple are still suing each other, and Twitter, Facebook have unresolved patent issues. As for our country, Namyang and Starbucks had a dispute over their similarity of their products' trademarks. Well, how about Korea? Let's talk about Korea's IP rights. It has been a while since Korea enlarged its investments in high value-added business rather than traditional industry. The government of Korea had implemented a variety variety of policies to protect and globalize IPs of Korea. Let's look at some examples again. First case is the ordinary and obvious industrial IP right case. This case is about mineral water called Samdasu. Samdasu is a mineral water brand which takes up more than 40% of the mineral water market in Korea, and it is very popular among Chinese tourists. However, when Samdasu tried to launch in China, its name has already been registered, both in Korean and Chinese. So Samdasu couldn't use it. In order to solve these problems, we should take some measures. By revision of the system and proper training, the government is trying to avoid the same trouble. Well, let's move on to the next slide. Next is our main topic today, the geographical indication system. Hereinafter we call it the GI. The GI system is used where producer wants to indicate especially the origin of the product. Now that happens very typically when the manufacturer is very confident about the locality of the product. They think that by declaring the originality of the goods itself, it guarantees the quality of the product. GIs in general, so, have 4 functions. Number 1 is origin functions. Number 2, it indicates quality. Number 3, it can lure further investments and advertise their regions. It can protect traditional cultures. Like this, geographical indication can show and prove products' quality, reputation, and credibility. This is especially the case of agricultural products. We'll get to that later. One successful example of agricultural product is the example of Sangju dried persimmon. After it met the requirement to be the GI products in 2007, all the process to make Sangju dried persimmon from cultivation to dehydration and packaging were all done in Sangju. Manufacturers were all registered in a corporation and were guided to produce with a standardized plan, resulting in overall increase in product sales and value. So our suggestion today is that we can do the same good work by supporting Boseong Green Tea. That's Boseong. Let's take a look at Boseong Green Tea. Its sales of green tea itself is only 48.5 million won per year, but tourism related to that brings about 500 billion won per year. These facts provide us with enormous possibilities. For Boseong Green Tea, recent demand for well-being trend and also boost up the value of Boseong Green Tea as a GI product. By this trend pumping up, demands for local health product using GI as an engine can bring positive effect of the GI system in supporting policies to promote globalization of Korean traditional food. I would like to close up with this slide. As mentioned before, the success of in the 21st century cannot be seen without intangible assets. A hard competition is going on globally to obtain exclusive rights protecting and utilizing intellectual property rights. The IPR system is a measure to grant exclusive rights to make more use of this measure. Every country is widening the range of it. Therefore, IP-related personnel are accumulating more knowledge and property, turning it into right, promoting competitiveness to survive in the global market. Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. That will be it.